This series, honestly, I don't know how many weeks I'm going to spend on this series. I may take through the rest of the year. I'm not exactly sure. I think I'm going to take my time. And I think we'll do this through the end of the year because, you know, everybody on the news, they talk about, you have to understand the context. Yeah, actions must be understood in light of context. And you know what that is. That's just an excuse for Nazism and barbarism and atrocities. It's like a get-out-of-jail-free card. You can kill as many Jews as you want as long as you point to, look at the context. And Jews dare not, so punch a Jew in the nose, no, we can't respond because we'll perpetuate the cycle of violence. We must end I'm going to provide for you the most context of all contexts, starting 4,000 years ago. I'm going to provide context for you like no one's provided. Well, in books. But we're going to be making the case for Israel as the Jewish people's homeland. Making the case for Israel, the Jewish people's homeland. So if you're not interested in seeing the historic and theological and cultural background of why Israel has every right to the land, to be able to put what's happening and what may wind up being escalating to, for all we know, a worldwide conflict. Before we get into that, you should at least know what the origins of this conflict are about. And so we will do that step by step by step, making the case for Israel, the Jewish people's homeland. We're going to start for the next few weeks with the biblical record. And that's going to take us from 2000 BC, the time of Abraham, all the way through 135 AD. Yes, I understand that's 100 years after the time of Jesus. It is 65 years or 70 years after the close of the New Testament. But nonetheless, if the last book was written in, let's say, 90 or 95 AD, we're within shooting distance of the time the Bible was closed, the canon was closed. And so in the last New Testament book was written. And this major event that occurs in 135 is going to be very, very helpful for us. So the biblical record from 2000, so we're going to cover, obviously, 2,100 years. We begin 4,000 years ago with a study of the covenants. And I'm going to take you step by step through, starting with Genesis. We're going to look at the Jewish right to the land and why they have a right to the land. It begins with the Abrahamic covenant. Now, many of you have sat through my teaching on the Abrahamic covenant before, and this will not be as comprehensive a presentation of all the nuances and features of the Abrahamic covenant as it's laid out in the book of Genesis, as I would normally do. I'm going to be focusing in on the land promises within the Abrahamic covenant. Obviously, that's my purpose. So for a more comprehensive treatment of the Abrahamic covenant, you'll have to see previous teaching. We begin in Genesis 12, verses 1 through 3. This is the first of 6 encounters that God has with Abraham, where he lays out a basket, a collection of promises that together, as a collection, is a contract, is a covenant, in other words. It's an agreement between God and Abraham's progeny. throughout time. So we begin here in 12, verse 1. Now the Lord said to Avram, this is before Abraham is known as Abraham. He is still the high father here, Avram, and he is commanded by God, or shall we say invited by God. Go forth from your country, which was Mesopotamia, it was Ur. We'll look at that in a moment. I've got a map to show you. And from your relatives and from your father's house to the land which I will show you. So leave Mesopotamia and you're going to go to a new land. You're going to relocate. You're going to leave your position and you're going to go to a land which God doesn't tell him what the land is. He will show him. In order to be able to be shown what the land is, what's entailed when the details aren't given ahead of time, is to follow the Lord and his leading. One of the things that I despise when I'm going from one place to another with friends and it's an unfamiliar place is when a friend or a colleague or a pastor, I'm speaking at their church or whatever, and they'll say, follow me, follow my car, and I will take you to the house that I'll show you where I'm going to take you, or the church or the restaurant or whatever it is. I prefer to have the address very specifically and to know exactly so I can plug it in to my Google Maps and I can follow along. So I'm following it. I'm also following Siri and her voice as well and her instructions. I feel more secure. But that's not how this goes with Abraham, with Avram. God says, I will show you this land. So follow me. Don't worry, I won't lose you. This is where Avram begins on the far, this is my left, which would be your right. You'll see Ur, so it was a big city. It was a giant city. Very, very advanced. You had the ziggurat of Ur, very, very impressive city. Technologically, as advanced as cities came in those days. That's where Abraham was originally from. And we trace Avram's route. There's two possible routes that he took, both of which following rivers. The northern route would have been following the Tigris River. I think he probably most likely took the route following the Euphrates River, but nonetheless winds up in the city of Haran, which is right there at the top, and then makes his way, takes a left, goes south at Albuquerque, not at Albuquerque, at Haran, and enters into the Holy Land, which you can see is right there. So that is Canaan. That's the land that Avram is relocating to. Now, when you do this, God says, I will make you a great nation, a numerous nation, in other words, and I will bless you. In other words, I will attribute very good things toward you. Good things will come because I will make them happen. And I will make your name great. Your reputation will be long-lasting and it will be stellar. Your name will be one of renown, lasting through history. And in fact, those of you paying attention in current events, you'll remember that the recent peace accords between Israel prior to our current administration's treatment of Israel, there was an administration that actually was able to broker peace between, so everybody said it couldn't be done, but it was, through four different Arab Muslim nations. And these accords were called the Abraham Accords. Because as we'll see, both the Arabs and Israel are children of Abraham. And so even now, in a worldwide political sense, not a religious sense, but in a political sense, the name of Abraham was invoked for these accords. So indeed, it's very, very clear that God absolutely kept his promises. Every one of those clauses, you can see God keeping his promises. And so you shall be a blessing. So not only will God bless Abraham, but that will result in Abraham and his progeny being a blessing toward others, toward those to whom they interact. And I will, speaking of that influence of blessing, there will be retributive justice, reciprocal, holy karma, in other words. I will bless those who bless you, Abraham, and all to whom this covenant pertains, Israel. And the one who curses you, I will curse. So on an individual or on a corporate level, whether we're talking about one-on-one, or whether we're talking about nation to nation, those who bless Abraham and his progeny in this covenant will be blessed. God will see to it. But then there's also the flip side. And this is where I would not want to be. The one who curses you, I will curse. Now, in the case, hypothetically, where you had a sick, barbarous death cult who said that claim that their loftiest ambition is to die as a martyr to their God, then it would seem that they would want to go, if their loftiest ambition was death, then it would seem that they would be going after that curse, or that blessing for them, a blessing for them would be death, and a curse would be continued life. It's hard to figure out when you have such a backwards, that's a hypothetical, when you have such a hypothetically sick and barbarous ideology where death is your loftiest ambition. And you, except of course, if you happen to be one of the multi-billionaires leading such a hypothetical death cult living in a completely different country. These guys, 3 of them, worth $4 billion apiece. But that's a hypothetical. Anyway, and in you, all the families, all the nations of the earth will be blessed. That's true in so many ways. You know, I once saw a YouTube video, I'm going to try to find it because it's fun, of the past 20 years, there's been something called a BDS movement, which is divestment. Basically, you're trying to boycott divestment, and I don't know what the S stands for, but you're trying not to buy Israeli products, right? You try to boycott Israeli products. But then, when you actually look at every invention, Jewish invention, whether they be Israeli specifically or whether they be Jewish, and you try to not use those things, well, first of all, give up your smartphone. Second of all, get out of your blue jeans. Third of all, half the medications that you are taking, you can't take. There's so many innovations. There's so many blessings, large and small, that if we actually began to list them and count them, as this YouTube, I've got to find, actually did, it will stagger the imagination. So it is without question true that all the nations of the earth have been blessed with the Jewish people. Now, that's not even to mention the greatest blessing of all that comes from Abraham and his progeny through this covenant, which is our Messiah himself. As Yeshua said in the Gospel of John, salvation is from the Jews. So we have indeed been blessed. We get to just a few verses later to Genesis 12:7. We have another appearance of the Lord, another interaction, where we have a furtherance, an expansion of the Abrahamic covenant. The Lord appeared to Avram and said, "To your descendants I will give this land." So henceforth, prior to this rather, heretofore, that's the word I was looking for, there has been no mention of ownership of the land that God will show Avram, that he is to relocate, crossing the entirety of the Fertile Crescent, taking a left turn at Albuquerque and going down. There's been no mention of that, but here, just a few verses, 4 verses later, we see the larger picture begin to unfold. To your descendants, to Avram's descendants, I will give this land. Not given yet. No mention of it given to you, Abraham, but mentioning your descendants, which is very abstract and hypothetical, because at this point in time, Avram has no children. There are no descendants. So it's an abstract promise. It's ethereal. So he built an altar there to the Lord who would appear to him. So he worshiped. He says, I'll take it on faith. I have no descendants, but I'm still a relatively young man, 75, whatever. I still have a little vim and vigor in me, and we'll see what happens. Next chapter, Avram and his nephew Lot have separated. Lot has relocated to the cities of the plain. Remember that when Avram comes to the land that God shows him, Canaan, it's called Canaan because it is already possessed. It is filled with Canaanites who are living there. So the idea of future ownership of the land is truly abstract, because as far as facts on the ground, there are many villages, towns, and hamlets strewn throughout the highways and byways of Canaan already 4,000 years ago that already have a stake. But here in chapter 13, verses 14 and following, the Lord said to Avram after Lot had separated from him, "Now, Avram, lift up your eyes and look from the place where you are, northward and south, somewhere paralleling the Dead Sea area where he is, so somewhere in the middle of the lower middle of the country, northward and southward and eastward and westward. In other words, in every direction in which one can look. Don't look up, you'll go blind looking at the sun. Don't do that. For all the land that you see, northward and southward and eastward and westward, for all the land that you see, I will give it to you and your descendants forever. So we have previously had the promise that I will give it to your descendants, but now we have, I will give it to you as well and your descendants, and we have it's called a durative term, duration, time. And what is that time forever. I will give it to you and your descendants forever. Still, not yours yet, but it will be, and when it's yours, it will be yours forever. He goes on to say, I will make your descendants, remember, great nation, a numerous nation, I will make your descendants as the dust of the earth, so that if anyone can number the dust of the earth, then your descendants can also be numbered. So I will make of you a great nation. The illustration, the metaphor that he's using here, the illustration is, look at, while you're walking, looking north, east, west, look at the ground every now and then and see how much dust there is on the air, how much dirt there is in the land. Right? If you can measure the dirt in the land, then your descendants can also be numbered. In other words, it's a rhetorical illustration. It's not meant to be specific because it's innumerable. You will have innumerable descendants because I will make of you a great nation. Arise, walk up, don't just look north, south, east, west. Get moving. Don't just look north and south. Start walking north and then turn around and walk south and then east and west. Walk about the land throughout its length and breadth, for I will give it to you. How many times does he say in just this short number of 3 verses, I will give you this land? Twice, and he said it a third time in chapter 12. Now we move to chapter 15. We're not going to look at all the verses in chapter 15, but we're just going to look at some highlights. After these things, the word of the Lord came to Avram in a vision, saying, do not fear, Avram, I am a shield to you. Your reward shall be very great. And time has passed, and still there are no children. So Avram says, yeah, what kind of reward you're going to give me? I'm childless, etc., etc. You're a whole lot of talk right now. I've moved. I've relocated everything. You made some promises to me, but everything is dependent on having a son. I got no son. So, verse 5, skipping a few verses. He took him outside. God took Avram outside and said, now look toward the heavens and count the stars. And just in chapter 13, he said, look down, count the dirt. Okay? So apparently that didn't make a sufficient impression to Avram, looking down. So this time we're going to try a different tack. Avram, look up. Okay? So one was daytime and looking down. Now it's nighttime and look up. Look toward the heavens, count the stars, if you're able to count them. Obviously, it's another rhetorical illustration, not meant to actually be literal, because it is innumerable. Nobody can count the stars. No matter what kind of Hubble fancy schmancy telescope you have, you cannot count the stars. As Carl Sagan famously said 40 years ago, billions and billions, and I don't know what the latest number estimate is, but you can't count them. And he said to him, so shall your descendants be. So innumerable is the point. Then Avram believed in the Lord, and he reckoned it to him as righteousness. And he said to Avram, I am the Lord who brought you out of Ur of the Chaldeans. I brought you out of that sophisticated, hip city. I brought you into the backwoods, the backwoods of Canaan, to give you this land, to possess it. That's why I brought you here, to give you. You don't own the land yet. It's not your land yet, and it's not your descendants' land, but you will, because that's the whole point of you being here, that I brought you here. I'm showing you this land. I said, come and follow me. I will show you, and I will give you the land. Not just to live there, but to possess it. Because Israel has a right to the land. God said to Avram, know for certain, it's not going to happen right away. Okay, a little background here. Know for certain your descendants will be strangers in a land that is not theirs. Well, that's a little monkey wrench in the whole works, isn't it? Where they will be enslaved, that gets worse. And oppressed, even worse, 400 years. So they're going to be, his descendants are somehow going to be out of the land, and it's not going to be going well for them. They're actually going to be enslaved and oppressed. But I will also judge the nation whom they will serve, and afterward they will come out with many possessions. See, what's going to happen is that those who curse, the nation that curses the people of Israel, will be cursed. But Israel will receive blessing. And in fact, they will be quite set up very nicely with a nice nest egg when they receive all the back wages that they had earned by serving as slaves in Egypt as they plunder or spoil the Egyptians, as the scripture tells us. Afterward, they will come out many possessions. But as for you, Avram, here's how it's going to go for you. You'll go to your fathers in peace. In other words, you're not going to see slavery. You're not going to see oppression. You're going to go to your fathers in peace. You'll be buried at a good old age. You got some runway left of life, okay? So lots of things can happen in the amount of runway that you still have. But then in the fourth generation of your descendants, they will return here so in other words, after 400 years, for the iniquity of the Amorite, one of the people groups that lives there, is not yet complete. See, remember, it's called the land of Canaan because there are Canaanites and Amorites and all kinds of ites there. But they should not be displaced now. No, but give them enough time and enough rope, and they will hang themselves. It will be right and just for your descendants to conquer this land in my name and at my directives, because those who live here will be so morally reprehensible by that time, for such a long period of time, that it will be right and just for God to cleanse the land with the actions of his people Israel. On that day, it says, the Lord made a covenant with Avram, saying, this is, remember when Avram is sleeping and God marches through the severed pieces, and he ratifies this covenant, the Abrahamic covenant with Avram, and he says, it's the formal statement, to your descendants I have given this land. Not I will, but I have given this land. As soon as they arrive, it's theirs. It's theirs. From the river of Egypt, and now we get some boundaries here, because before all we had was north and south and east. How good is your eyesight? How far are you walking? What's the boundaries? What's the border? Right? A nation is only as defined as its border. It's a truism thrown in for nothing, no extra charge, but should be apparently abundant for everyone. Abundantly apparent, rather. From the river of Egypt, as far as the great river, the river Euphrates, the Kenite, the Kenizzite, the Cabinite, the Hittite, these are all the people who live in the land. The Hittite, the Perizzite, the Rephaim, the Amorite, the Canaanite, the Girgashite, the Jebusite, the Satellite, the Mosquitobite, the Kryptonite, all the ites, okay? Yeah, they all live here, Avram. But your descendants will be justified in taking this land, because it is a certainty, they're not even born yet, but I have already given it to them. And if we look at what actually is promised to the Jewish people as the land of promise to Avram, they've never had this much. They came close under Solomon. They came very close. And in fact, a great deal of overlap, but never exactly what was promised. It actually extends. You can see this is just this is Israel in the Bible as we know it. Okay, and Israel in the Bible, the border takes you right up here to the brook of Egypt. It's not the Sinai Peninsula. Sinai Peninsula does not belong to the Holy Land. If the Sinai Peninsula belonged to the Holy Land, as soon as Israel got out of slavery and went into the desert, Moses would have said, we're here. Okay? But no, Sinai Peninsula is not part of the Holy Land. The brook of Egypt is the border. And this is what mostly the Jewish people had in the time of the Bible. from Dan to Beersheba, north to south. Now, down here is Elat. This is the Red Sea down here, also the Red Sea there. This is the Red Sea here. This is Elat. Not a lot like, but that's the town. That's what the town's called, Elat. This is Jordan today on this side of the Jordan River right here. But you see, it's all the way through here. It includes not only what's Israel today, but it actually also includes Jordan, and takes you, this, by the way, right here, where the Brook of Egypt ends, and you've got this little area. That's the Gaza Strip. And then you've got Lebanon and Syria, and we go all the way up through Iraq. That's the promised land, according to Genesis 15. That's the promised land. Next time, we will see how the birth of Ishmael, who is the firstborn son of Abraham, and, spoiler alert, the father of Arabs today, as is counted and understood, we will see whether the birth of Ishmael is the answer or is the next component in the Abrahamic covenant, and how that works together to move forward with the Abrahamic covenant, or if the Abrahamic covenant makes no advancement through the birth of Ishmael. We will discover that together next time, but until then, I'll have to keep you in suspense.